Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the ASP.NET MVC framework and how to incorporate inversion of control inside of our controllers. Fortunately, the ASP.NET MVC framework makes this very easy for us, and we can do this within a few lines of code. And you can pretty much use any IoC container that you want. Today we'll be using the StructureMap IoC containers. That's my tool of choice. And we'll be using a demo app that has very little meaning and no real value, but it will show us how to get it done very easily and very simply. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm actually going to want to create a fake service. Now normally this service would be outside of my web layer, but for this demo we'll go ahead and keep it inside of our web project. We'll call this ISomeUsefulService. We want to go ahead and make this public, and we'll have this return a string of on a method called getValue. Nothing major here. We're going to want to go ahead and create a concrete type of this. And we'll do return some value. Really what this would be my service method. This is what's going to be injected into our controller. The next thing we need to do is actually create ourselves a controller factory so that we can actually snag the controller invocation at runtime and use IoC to create it instead of letting the MVC framework create one for us. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a class here. Now if you're using the MVC contrib, you can go ahead and use some of their base classes that they've got for you. I thought it was just simpler to do my own because I didn't need any extra functionality that it would include within the MVC contrib project. But feel free to use that. It's a very great tool and something I actually use within my own projects. So we're going to go ahead and call this IoC ControllerFactory. We're going to create this. It's got to be public. And for this to work, it needs to inherit off of default ControllerFactory. This is part of the MVC framework. We want to override one method. I want to override the getController instance. Now inside of here I want to actually hijack the return and do return object factory StructureMap's IoC container. We'll do getInstance of controller type. Now in a real situation you may want to do some error checking here, maybe wrap this within a try-catch or check to see if the type has actually been created or registered within the IoC container. But for this demo we'll just assume that everything is registered. So we've actually created our controller factory, but now we actually have to wire up our controller factory. To do this, let's go ahead and go over to our global.asax file, and I'm going to want to come into here and create some code. So what we're going to want to do right now is do our controller builder .current, and we're going to set the controller factory. Now the controller builder is a class within the MVC framework, and that's actually what takes care of the invocation of all your controllers. And we're going to instantiate an instance of my IoC controller factory. Go back over here and do new. Go ahead and import that namespace. Well, now we actually need to wire up our service, our concrete, to our implementation. And I'm just going to do a little shortcut here and do StructureMap configuration for requested type. I am not fingering this correctly. There we go. Let's go ahead and move this over here real quick. Now normally you would not want to put all your registration code within your app start. You'd probably want to put that over into a shared class, that way you can use it elsewhere. For this demo we'll go ahead and keep it in here. So now that I've wired this up, we need to actually go over to our controller. Now right now our controller will just create with an empty constructor, but we actually wanted to inject our ISomeUsefulService class. We'll make this private, bring that in. Now I'm going to want to create a constructor where I can receive an instance of that ISM useful service. And now I've wired it up so I can receive that service. Now let's go ahead and create a call to that service. We'll go ahead and copy, paste this here. We'll call this content. And we'll call our method called getValue. And that should reach into our service and return back our hard-coded value. But now we actually want to go over to our web page to just dump out that value. Let's just go ahead and create a piece of code right here. Content. So I've now wired it up to my view data to display it on the screen, and I should be good to go. So if I've wired this whole thing up correctly, I should be able to F5 this. And I wanted to start on my view page, so we'll just go ahead and change our route real quick. I've hit my breakpoint. I do have a service. Should be able to step into it, and I can. That's great. Now let's go ahead and F5 this again. And I've outputted my message. So that tells me that I've wired out the MVC framework to hook into my IoC container to go and construct an instance of my controller, injecting all of its dependencies. And I can actually call into those dependencies as well and return values to the screen. You could, of course, do this for any object that you can wire up to be a dependency. Maybe it's a repository, maybe it's a service, maybe it's an internal business object, whatever you want it to be, you can wire that up. And obviously it will wire up all of the down the chain dependencies as well for you. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Once you have your service, you basically just need to create a couple lines of code inside of a custom controller factory, and you can make this method here as fancy and bulletproof as you want by adding error catching and whatnot. You'll then just need to go over to your application start, somehow wire up your IoC container, and then basically set the current factory to be the custom factory you created, and then add an access point inside your controller, and then you should be good to go. Well, I hope you learned something. Until next time.